It's really interesting. Jay, where are you, Jay? Put your hand up for me so I can see you. Jay has a thing he says when he talks about safety in the workplace. He says, if you are doing what you think is morally right, you're a long way towards doing what is legally right. And looking at what Carly was saying there, if we were to work towards making our workplaces a nice place to be, if we were working to make our workplaces a place where people felt supported, felt that they had growth and development, felt that their managers were looking out for them, felt that they understood what their role in the business was, we'd go a long way to filling the things that Safe Work Australia is saying are the common hazards. We go a long way to filling those other psychosocial hazards that we're not going to really talk about today, because Carly could have probably spoken for another 2 hours on workplace wellbeing. I could speak all day on psychosocial hazards and we still wouldn't touch them all. Right? So that's why I think Safe Work Australia's gone, these are the common ones, because what we're trying to do now is to start people thinking about it. Because in reality, we've been talking about workplace wellbeing for a long time. But when was the last time someone came to you, but prior to all this, and said, I want to talk to you about psychosocial hazards? This is a new way of looking at things. And if we look at the legislation in every state, it's actually been covered. It's been in the safety legislation. We've just, for some reason, ignored it. And what have we seen in the last few years? We've seen mental injury claims increasing. Victoria now has 15% of all new claims as mental injury claims. The rest of the country, or the average for the rest of the country, is 9%. So we are once again excelling here in Victoria. We like to do better than everyone else. They are predicting that by the end of this decade, 33% of all new claims will be mental injury claims. And given that they're, 4 times the cost, 4 times the duration, that should be concerning. So why is it that we're only now just starting to talk about psychosocial hazards? So I'm not going to talk about all of them, because, as I said, I could do this all day. I've been doing a 45-minute presentation on this for the meat industry for the last couple of months. What I want to look at is this. There's one thing I want you to go away with today, thinking inside your organisations that we can look at and we can change and we can control, that will make a big difference to the impact of psychosocial hazards in our workplace. So if we look at traumatic events, we look at remote or I can't even talk, I'm having your tongue twister now, remote or isolated work. If we look at poor physical environment, if we look at violence and aggression, they're things that are a bit outside of everything else. They're isolated incidents. But there are another 10 things that are impacted very directly by one thing in your organisation. If we look at management and supervision, this is probably the cause of most of your psychosocial hazards in the workplace. We start with job demands. Who is it who's actually identifying what work needs to be done and how many resources we have for it? Management, supervisors. We can't afford another staff member. Okay, but now if you can't afford another staff member but you're burning your current staff members out, you'll be in breach of the code. Low job control. Right? So if we're actually working in teams, now there are some organisations, some businesses where there is no choice. It's conveyor belt, that's low job control. But there are other businesses where there's micromanagement by team leaders, where people are only given a certain amount to do, even though their expertise and their experience and their ability, and indeed the reason they took the job is because they can do a lot more. Poor support. Who do we look for support in our teams, in our businesses? Who is it who should be teaching the team to support each other? Lack of role clarity. Who is it when you start a job that's meant to be identifying to you what it is that you are meant to be doing? Who is it who's meant to be checking in with you during probation and pointing out to you that you're not quite doing what I'm expecting of you? Here's what I need to see. Here's how I need to see you grow. Right? Poor organisational change management. Who is it who's meant to communicate to the team about the changes taking place? My personal favourite, inadequate reward and recognition. Who here's worked for an organisation where you've worked your butt off and someone else has got the pay rise or someone else has got the promotion? Right. Someone else has got the, geez, you're doing a great job. You're doing 5 times the work that person's doing, but the manager likes this person more than you. Right. Who here's worked for an organisation where bonus structures aren't actually very concrete? I've worked for somewhere at the end of the year it's like, well, this person's getting this and this person's getting this. Why? Because I like this person and I don't like this person. Yeah, as opposed to Carly, Alex and I have all worked for an organisation where they might have had a few other issues going on in their psychosocial well-being, but what they were very clear on is their bonus structure. You hit this, you got Y. Right? So how people are rewarded, whether it's bonuses, whether it's just encouragement, is very important. But once again, that comes from the team leader, the supervisor and management above. Poor organisational justice. When we allow one person to do something and not another, and Andrew talked about that before, where we don't have consequences for poor behaviour. So it might be that there's someone in the team who is quite toxic, but the business, and especially the team leader who should be raising this to the business, is not doing anything about it. And one of the things I love hearing is, yes, but they're making us a lot of money. I dealt with a finance organisation many years ago, and in the space of 3 months, they had 6 mental injury claims. Right? And they're saying, yes, but we can't get rid of the manager because he's making us so much money. I didn't know as much as I know now. I brought in an expert, a guy I've had a lot of faith in, who did the premium calculation for them and showed them how much money they were losing on their premium because of this person. And it took looking at those dollar figures for them to actually act. Where shouldn't they have just acted because what this person was doing was wrong? Right? Bullying. Whose job is it to keep an eye on the culture in the workplace? Right? Who is it who should be looking at their team and going, you know, Josh, I don't like the way you're dealing with David. Let's come and have a chat about it. That's not acceptable in our workplace. Because Josh is actually a lovely guy, so I shouldn't say that about him. Harassment, same thing. If we are seeing people sexually harass people in the workplace, it should be overt, shouldn't it? It's not like it's the quietest thing that's going on. Shouldn't the team leader be aware of this? Yet how many times have we gone in and spoken to the team leader and they go, oh yeah, but I didn't want to do anything about it. I didn't feel it was my place. I didn't want to cause trouble. I didn't want to make waves. Conflict and poor workplace relations. So our team is not getting along. Whose job is it to mediate? Whose job is it to try and make those people cohesive? Whose job is it to hire for fit? We should be hiring people who get along with the team. Our team last year sat down and we actually went through what is it that my team wants to see in people that we're hiring moving forward. So we could actually hire towards the attributes of what the team wanted in their team. Right? Makes sense, but how often are we doing that? Or we just go, look, we're busy, we'll put someone in place. And our hiring is going to become more and more important. We're going to have to start hiring not just for fit for the team, but fit for the job. I did some EAP many years ago for an insurance company in their call centre, and probably 6 to 10 people I saw in the space of 6 months didn't like the job. They were people. They liked to be face-to-face engagement. I had one person who said, I want to be a florist. I said, why'd you take this job? They said, I got to do it with people. But dealing with people over the phone is very different to dealing with people in person. So that organisation had to go back to their recruiters and say, what are you doing? Why are you sending us these people? Because they're not going to like this job. So it's how the team leaders, their expectations, their support of workers is going to be so important. And one of the things Carly said before was that these are multifactorial. It's not just this is one issue by itself. If we look at someone who's working in isolation, what we know is support is important. So if there's working in isolation and they're getting poor support from their managers and their team, it's actually not going to be a 1+1, it's going to be a multiplier. But it also goes back to if we have these situations happening where we know someone's isolated, shouldn't we be ensuring then that we're getting greater support in those areas? Because often they're neglected and they're forgotten about. And because the team's here, there's 10 of us here and we support each other, but there's one person sitting in the middle of nowhere that we forget about except when they dial into their team meeting. Well, these days we can Zoom them in or whatever, but we used to just be that voice in the box. No one had actually met them. How supported are they? So what I want you to do after today is go back to your businesses and actually think about your managers and supervisors. What are their skill sets? Have they been hired because they are good managers? Or have they been hired because they're good at building a widget? Which is what we see in most organisations. They're actually good technically. And what do we know about a lot of people who are really good technically? They're not that great with people all the time. I'm not saying it's a golden rule, but a lot of times they're not because they've never been taught those skills. Right? What are we doing about identifying the people who are right to go into those positions? So we can actually sit there and look at our team and go, who is actually going to be good at leading? Who actually has any form of management or leadership training? Who actually identifies people based on the skills we want to see in leadership? Because I tell you what, if that technical person gets in there, they're not going to enjoy that job, right? Because now instead of doing what they were good at, they're going to be dealing with people. And people are difficult. People are hard, and sometimes people are horrible. But they're also not going to want to give up the $10,000 or $20,000 pay rise they just got to go back and do their old job. They'll also potentially see it as a failure. They don't want to go back and not be a manager now because the team will think I failed. So there's a lot of that embarrassment, a lot of that ego that goes with it. So what I want you all to do is start thinking about your leadership, your supervisors, your managers, all the way up, and thinking, why did we choose these people? And have we chosen them for the right reason? Right? And when you look at that, that will actually start to look at 10 of the 14 things Safe Work Australia is saying are common issues in the workplace. And if you can get that management supervision right, you're going to actually start to impact very positively on a lot of those areas.